It began in the quietest house on the richest street in the city, the mansion of Mr. Edward Lancaster. A powerful businessman known for his fortune and flawless reputation, was always full of servants, cars, and luxury. But it was also full of silence. Inside that silence lived a little girl named Amelia, Edward's only daughter. Beautiful, delicate, and fragile as porcelain. Yet she had never spoken a single word. From the day she was born, doctors, therapists, and specialists from across the world came and went, offering tests, scans, medicines, and hope. But Amelia remained silent. Not a word, not even Papa. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and Edward blamed himself. And perhaps silently even his daughter. The doctors called it selective mutism. Edward called it a curse. No matter how much money he spent, no matter how many specialists he brought in, Amelia's silence became his greatest defeat. Every morning, the maids would open the tall glass windows, and Amelia would sit by them, staring out at the garden, quiet, expressionless, lost in her own world. Then one spring morning, a new maid arrived, Grace, a middle-aged black woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. She came from a small town, humble and kind, and had worked for families all her life. But something about Grace was different. She didn't treat the mansion like a palace. She treated it like a home. And she didn't treat Amelia like a broken doll. She treated her like a child. Grace noticed something no one else had. While others saw silence, Grace saw fear. Every afternoon, she would bring Amelia her snacks, tidy her room, and sit beside her and not saying much, just humming softly. Little songs she used to sing to her own son, who had passed away years ago. At first, Amelia didn't even look at her. But day by day, she began to listen. Grace would hum while folding clothes, dusting, watering the plants. And slowly, Amelia started following her with her eyes. One afternoon, Grace gently took Amelia's hand and drew a smiley face on her palm with her finger. Then she whispered, "You don't have to speak to be heard, baby girl. Just smile." For the first time, Amelia's lips trembled. Not quite a smile, but something close. Edward noticed none of this. He was buried in meetings, money, and misery. He had accepted that his daughter would live and die in silence. But Grace refused to believe that. She started taking Amelia to the garden after lunch. They would sit under the old oak tree, feeding birds. Grace would name them. "That's Ruby, the red one. That's Sam, always stealing crumbs." And sometimes Amelia would giggle, silently. Shoulders shaking, eyes bright, Grace saw it. And in her heart, she knew. This child is waiting for love to unlock her voice. It was a warm Sunday afternoon. The family went to the city park, something Edward rarely did. Grace tagged along, holding Amelia's small hand as the girl hid behind her. Edward sat on a bench reading financial papers, barely noticing the world around him. Grace led Amelia to a small pond where children were feeding ducks. A little boy accidentally bumped into Amelia, and she stumbled, falling to her knees. Her hand scraped, blood oozing slightly. Edward looked up, furious, ready to shout. But before he could take a step, Grace knelt beside Amelia, took her tiny hand gently, and whispered, "Shh, it's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. Look, the ducks are waiting for you." Amelia's lip trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, "The moment no one could believe," she whispered. "Hoarse and fragile. It hurts." The words were barely a breath, but they were words. Grace froze. Edward froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. Tears filled Grace's eyes as she smiled and said softly, "Oh, baby. You spoke. You spoke!" Edward dropped his papers, rushing over. He fell to his knees beside his daughter, not believing his ears. "Say it again." "Sweetheart," he whispered, voice shaking. "Please." But Amelia didn't repeat it. She just looked at him, really looked, and reached for Grace's hand, and that single gesture broke something deep inside. Edward, after that day, everything changed. Edward called the best doctors again, but they all said the same thing. Her speech returned because she felt safe. Someone reached her heart. Not her mind. Grace became Amelia's constant companion. They painted together, played music, read stories. Grace didn't push her to talk. She just loved her. Within months, Amelia was speaking in full sentences, Her favorite word was grace. Edward, humbled and amazed, began spending evenings with them in the garden for the first time. Laughter echoed through the Lancaster mansion. One night, as Grace tucked Amelia into bed, the little girl whispered, "Why did you help me, Grace?" Grace smiled softly. "Because someone once helped me when I lost my own voice, and love was the only medicine." Edward overheard those words from the doorway. He turned away, wiping tears silently. He realized then that all his money could build mansions, but only love could build a family. Years later, Amelia grew into a confident young woman. She became a speech therapist, helping other children find their voices, just as Grace helped her. At the grand opening of her therapy center, she stood on stage beside her father and Grace. Hundreds of guests watched as she gave her first public speech. She smiled, tears glistening, and said, "Once, I couldn't speak. But a woman who had nothing gave me everything. She taught me that love doesn't need a voice to be heard." The audience stood in silence, many crying. Edward held Grace's hand and whispered, "You gave me back my daughter." Grace smiled. "No, sir. She just needed someone to listen." The crowd applauded, and somewhere in that applause was the sound of healing, the sound of love that broke silence itself. Some miracles don't come from heaven. They come from hearts that refuse to give up. The millionaire had money, but the maid had love, and that love gave the world back a voice.